Tonight's presenter and friend of the library, Jay Futterman, has been an electric vehicle EV driver since 2017. He volunteers with Chicago for EVs, a local EV education and advocacy group, and he volunteers with several other environmental organizations, including the Sierra Club, the Illinois Solar Education Association, and Go Green Illinois, where he does educational outreach on solar energies and ways to fight climate change from home. He lives in Highland Park, where he serves on the city's sustainability advisory group. And through all of these activities, he tries to show how the green choices we can make are often less expensive and more enjoyable, which I agree with. Okay, so I'll hand it over to you, Jay. Let me know if you need anything. I'll be here.
Be here. Great. Okay, thank you so much. It's great to be back. I was here, I think, back in February and did an electric vehicle talk virtually, but it's in person. It's great to be in person and see people and interact. It's also nice to be on Zoom with all you at home. So we're going to talk about home electrification, ways to save money and the planet. Some people are going to come to this because of environmental reasons, and they're going to incorporate some of these changes because it's the thing that the planet needs us to do. That appeals to some people, but if it isn't really the thing that appeals most to you, well, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is going to save you money, because the cleaner choice, the more sustainable choice nowadays is often the one that is most economically feasible. So as Ashley said, I volunteer with the Sierra Club, I volunteer with Illinois Solar Education Association and other local environmental groups. I'm sure everyone remembers this from just a week ago, right? Dangerous air quality from the Canadian wildfires. That happened just after we were officially in a severe drought. And a couple days after that, parts of Chicago got 9 inches of rain in 24 hours. And then July 4th was the hottest day in recorded history on planet Earth. And July 5th also was the hottest day. So there's a pattern here that's concerning to me and hopefully to you as well. And, this wasn't just an isolated event that happened over the course of a week. This happened in New York City earlier in the year. Hurricanes in Florida, top left there is the Paradise Fire in California. Bottom left is some flooding in Pakistan last year that displaced some like 8 million people. And bottom left bottom right, I'm sorry, is Lake Mead, which major water supply for California, which is at historic lows. Fortunately, it's back up where it needs to be. But there's a pattern here. The past 8 years were the warmest on record, and sure, climate changes. Temperatures go up and down, and historically, we could see that over the last 800,000 years, there's been, elevations and decrease in carbon dioxide, and the weather and climate has changed along with that. But what's a little unprecedented is all the way at the left end. Since 1950, when we really got into the burning of coal and fossil fuels, we've shot through the roof. So the Earth is really out of balance, and we're just beginning to see some of the effects from that. But say, that doesn't matter to you, fine. Economics matters to us all, right? So this stuff is expensive. And this is kind of a busy slide, but historically, inflation adjusted, we've had roughly $3 billion climate incidents in America per year historically. In the recent years, that's increased quite a bit, and that's a cost that we all are paying, whether we realize that or not. So what to do about this? Well, you heard the term carbon footprint, right? So where did that come from? Quick quiz here. Was it Al Gore? Did Al Gore make that up? Or Bill McKibben? I don't know if you guys know who Bill McKibben is, 350.org. He's a writer, scientist, environmentalist. Was it Greta Thunberg? Did she make that up? Or was it British Petroleum? The answer is British Petroleum, right? Because they want to make it seem like it's our problem, but really we're not the problem, right? The problem is the fossil fuel companies, and like tobacco companies, they sell a product that we're, as a society, we're addicted to. And what makes changes is government action, large social movements, elections. These are things that are going to sway the needle on this. But that being said, each of us makes choices. What each of us does matter. And these tips I'm going to give today are things we can do to make a difference. And if you do it and you do it and you do it and you tell your neighbors, all that can add up. And you're going to save money. You're going to feel better about what you're doing. But don't let this stop at your front door. Always try and do more so we can kind of roll this up and grow it. So this is kind of our goal, I think. This is where I'm hoping to get as many people as possible. That's my electric bill from August, September last year, 0. Okay, how did I get there? I've got solar panels on my roof. I have an attic that's really thoroughly insulated. So I've done a lot of weatherization on the house. On the bottom, these things use a lot of electricity. This is my water heater. It's a heat pump water heater. I think most of us probably have fossil gas power, methane gas power water heaters. This is a heat pump. We'll talk about that later. That's my Chevy Bolt in the middle. I've been driving an electric car since 2017. It costs me about 2 cents to go a mile driving on electricity. Compare that to gas. It's quite a way of saving money. It's way more fun to drive also. Bottom right there, that is my heat pump, air conditioner, heat pump heater. So that takes care of my heating and cooling through 90% of the winter without burning any fossil fuels. So these are all things that we can do at our house that are going to save money, lower carbon emissions, and make you feel good. So I've got 5 main themes that I'm going to kind of go through with this presentation. One, I've said this a bunch of times already, but this will save money. There's the Inflation Reduction Act that passed last year. So we'll talk about some of those incentives that are available now. The cleaner choice is the greener choice. We're going to talk about how to use less power, conservation and efficiency. We're going to talk about using cleaner power, electrifying things, and then using power at different times of the day. And talk about the importance of planning ahead rather than buying things in an emergency and then things to take it beyond your house. Okay. So Inflation Reduction Act. I think most of us have probably heard of that, have some vague idea of what's in there. The best sites, if you want to learn more about it, are rewiringamerica.org and energy.gov/save. Those are the best sites. They're very comprehensive about what it means to individual homeowners. And the Inflation Reduction Act has got a whole bunch of tax credits and income-based rebates that can save you over $20,000 in a transition to cleaner, cheaper, and more efficient homes. So what does a really efficient house look like? A net zero house or something close to it. So on the roof, we're going to have some solar panels. We're going to have efficient lighting. I think most of us have probably got rid of those incandescent bulbs by now. Low flow fixtures in our plumbing means you're going to use your hot water more efficiently. Well insulated walls and windows. We're going to look at all the sources that in the house that are using fossil gas and replace them with electric versions. So that's going to be in our kitchen. That's going to be our water heater, possibly our clothes dryer, and our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system. And, a net zero house can look kind of futuristic, like the one in the top right there, or it could look pretty average, like the one in the bottom right. Right? It just comes down to being smart about how you use energy and how you build your house. So within the Inflation Reduction Act, so everybody can save, right? So there's a 30% solar credit, and I'll go into that in more detail later. There's a $2,000 tax credit for heat pump air conditioner and heaters, $2,000 heat pump water heater credit, You can get $1,200 for weatherization, so doors, windows, insulation. You can get $150 off a home energy audit, which is really the best place to start. And there's additional potential savings, $700 or $7,500 off of qualifying electric vehicles. Income qualified people can get up to $8,000 off their heat pump HVAC, and an additional $3,750 off their water heater. And there's a credit in there for induction stovetop as well. There's a lot more, but those are kind of the high points. And you can see that this all can kind of add up. So again, those two sources that I'd recommend for a real thorough listing of all the credits: rewiringamerica.org, energy.gov/save. Okay, so that's sort of the higher level stuff of how to save. Now, let's talk about using less power, conservation, and efficiency. So ComEd, our utility, will do some free home energy audits. They're pretty basic, but they do provide replacement light bulbs. They'll do some pipe insulation. They'll change out the faucets and put little aerators on there. They can get you a smart thermostat, power strips, things of that nature. It's worth doing. It's free. But really where the money is with a professional energy audit. So these are qualified people that are going to go through your house top to bottom, system by system, and tell you what's right, what's wrong. They're going to do something called a blower door test, which looks at the building envelope to see where all the leaky parts are, where money and energy is literally flying out the roof or out the window. They'll take a look around with an infrared camera, and they'll also assess your appliances, look at safety issues and ventilation and things like that. So that was really transformational for me. I thought I was pretty, into this stuff. I kind of had a good idea, and then I had an energy audit and just opened my eyes to all sorts of new things. So my story here, we moved into the house about 10 years ago. We had the house inspected, usual inspector. He went up in the attic. He's like, "Oh, you got spray foam insulation. That looks really good." Well, when the energy auditor came in and took a look with the infrared camera, he's like, "This is terrible. You have a terrible spray foam. It's not thick enough anywhere. It's not serving as a vapor barrier. And there's all these cavities." So you could see the picture on the right with the infrared camera. That's a thin spot of insulation where hot air is just leaking right out the roof. And similar on the gable sides here. So that vertical wall, super leaky. Right? All my money that I'm spending to heat the house is going right out the window or right out the side. So he said it was essentially like having a window open in the attic at all times. That's how leaky this insulation was. So I had additional spray foam insulation put in, right? It reduced the leakage of the attic to the outside by 75%, and overall reduced my home's leakage to the outside by 20%. So really tightened up my building envelope. So what does that mean? It means my heating needs, my heating bills, my air conditioning bills are going to go down because I've got a good thick shell on the roof. And this is that part where there was that void before. Now it's really thick, uniform insulation. So, the other thing that he pointed out was with this particular type of spray foam, it has to be of a certain thickness to be a vapor barrier. He said with as thin as it is, moisture could be getting underneath the roof decking. So wanted to make sure I got that addressed. Spray foam insulation, it really seals all the cracks very well. You have to look for one that has a low global warming potential blowing agent. And like I mentioned before, weatherization, including insulation, there's a $1,200 tax credit through the Inflation Reduction Act for that. So other things that the energy auditor did was the blower door test, right? So we looked at things like my door to the garage here, and just looking with the infrared camera, well, you could see where all the heat is going out and all the cold air is coming in. So, there could be simple fixes that you could do, just like with a door sweep from the hardware store for $10. That cut down on the draftiness by quite a bit. Or in the living room, Programmable thermostats are great. You can set it so when you're sleeping, it's going to get a little bit colder. And when you're awake or out of the house, you don't need to use as much heating and cooling when you're at work, right? Simple things like curtains, right? If you have a southern window in the summertime, draw the curtains. And can lights, recessed lights in the ceiling. This was an eye opener for me as well. So take a look at the infrared camera there. Those are super leaky, right? Those are basically holes in the ceiling that energy is escaping through. You can get a can light retrofit like this that will seal right up against the ceiling. LED lights, and they're cheap, easy to install, and they eliminate that leakage issue. All right. If anyone has any questions, feel free to stop me, or if anyone on Zoom has questions, just pop them in the chat. All right. Let's talk about using cleaner power, electricity, electrifying everything, and also shifting our use. So this is something a lot of people don't think about, right? You get your electric bill every month, you pay your electric bill, but where does that electricity come from, and how much does it really cost? Well, most of us are just on a set price. We pay the same amount of cents per kilowatt hour, whether we use that energy in the morning, overnight, or at peak times between 2 and 6 in the afternoon. But because demand fluctuates and supply fluctuates, the value of electricity and the price of electricity fluctuates. And I'm on an hourly pricing system with ComEd. If you have solar, if you have an electric car, this may make a lot of sense. You're going to be paying a variable price for electricity depending on what the actual real-time price of electricity is. So this is just an interesting example from a date in May last year. The blue is what they predicted, the red is the actual prices. So overnight, when I charge my car, the price of electricity actually went negative because there was a lot of extra energy on the grid and not a lot of it was being used. So they just needed to dump it. So ComEd actually paid me to charge my car overnight. And then that day at 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock, it was probably kind of a warm May day, the price of electricity really shot up. It went up to 15 cents a kilowatt hour, which is pretty expensive if you watch this a lot. Now, during that time, my solar panels are pushing out electrons more than I'm using at home. So I'm actually selling my electricity to the grid at that time for 15 cents a kilowatt hour, and I'm buying it overnight for -2 cents a kilowatt hour. So this is how real-time pricing makes sense if you're someone like me. But if you just pay the regular set kilowatt hour price, what happens when electricity demand peaks is that the grid operators have to turn on different power plants, peaker power plants, they're called. Those are usually the dirtiest ones. Those are the dirtiest coal plants, like the one in Waukegan that recently got shut down, or dirty gas plants. So ideally, we want to avoid using electricity during those peak times. So to whatever extent you can, shift the load of electricity. So if you have an electric car, don't charge it between 4 and 6 o'clock in the afternoon, charge it overnight. If you want to run your dishwasher, most dishwashers have a delay feature on there, so you can delay it for 4 hours. That's what we do. We put the dishes in there after dinner, press delay, so it starts up at midnight. Same thing with your clothes washer. You can set that to delay in many cases. And wash in cold water. That's another tip. The majority of energy that a clothes washer uses is actually going to heat the water and works fine with cold water. ComEd has a number of programs to help people shift their load. They have the hourly pricing that we talked about just now. They have time of day pricing, which is sort of a simpler version, either peak, off peak, or overnight. There's a peak time savings where they'll send you a text message, and if you decrease your power use during that time, they give you a little bonus. And then there's air conditioning cycling program that they have, where for 15 minutes of every hour where there's peak demand, they'll shut your air conditioning off. And if you go to their website, Manage My Energy tab, they have a lot of information. They actually have a really good website that covers a lot of this stuff. So check that out. Like I said, if you have solar, if you have an electric car, hourly pricing is going to probably save you quite a bit of money. So electrifying things. So I mentioned a couple times that I've got solar on my roof. I initially installed in 2016, then I had it sized to cover all the electricity needs for my house. Then I got that electric car, started buying electricity again. So I put some more panels on. The top is my original installation on the east side. The bottom is on the west side of the house. And it basically covered all the electricity I needed to run my house, run my car. And then I got my heat pumps, and now I'm kind of back to buying electricity again during part of the year. But solar is the cheapest way to get electricity in Illinois. The Illinois Solar Education Association, I'm an ambassador with that group. We've got a lot of great information on that. There's an income qualified program called Illinois Solar for All. If you live in Lake County, family of four making $83,000 or less, you can pretty much get solar for almost nothing. If you don't have a roof that's suitable for solar, say you're a renter or you live in multi-unit housing or you have a lot of shading issues, you can do community solar. And Citizens Utility Board is a great resource for learning about community solar. Essentially what that means is you are subscribing to a field of solar panels somewhere typically in rural Illinois. You say, I will buy my electricity from this field of solar panels, and they'll sell it to you for less than what you're paying ComEd currently. So again, that's an example of my electric bill, zero. The solar panels, like I said, there is a 30% federal tax credit for this. So whatever it costs, materials, labor, permitting, inspections, bottom line cost, you send that in with your tax return, you'll get 30% of that back from the federal government. Illinois has a program which will cover another 20 to 30% of your installed cost. It's called the Solar Renewable Energy Credit Program. So with those two things together, you're going to get more than half of your expenses for solar paid for. There's net metering. Net metering means during the day when I'm making more energy than I need, I'm feeding that out onto the grid. And my smart meter is keeping track of how much energy I'm putting out onto the grid. And then at night, when the sun's not shining and I'm not making electricity, I'm taking energy from the grid and it's keeping track of that. So it kind of runs a balance, and that balance carries over from month to month. So May, June, July, I typically make excess energy. And then December, January, February, when it's dark for 16 hours a day, or there's snow on my panels and I'm not making energy, or at night, it all kind of balances out. At the end of the year, I have my system kind of designed so I make all the energy that I use. Although sometimes those electrons are going to my neighbor's house, and sometimes the electrons I use are coming from the power plant. But on the total, it evens itself out. With most installations now in Illinois, your break-even time is going to be 5 to 8 years. And it's going to provide you 20 to 30 years of electricity afterwards. So that's just essentially free money. There is a hefty cost up front, depending on what kind of system you get into. That's not for everybody. There's loans and things like that. There's also lease options. So there's companies that would be happy to install solar panels on your roof, no out-of-pocket cost. You would pay them monthly for the electricity that those panels produce. You're going to save about 20% versus buying electricity from the utility by doing the lease option. In the long run, you're going to come out better if you buy the panels yourself, but the lease option is a great option for people as well. I want to put in a plug here for the Illinois Solar Tour. This is on September 30th. This is happening all throughout the state. There are thousands and thousands of homes with solar in Illinois. This works in Illinois. This isn't just something for California and Texas and Arizona. There's, I'm sure, some homes that are going to be in this area as well. If you go to illinoissolar.org, you can find out what homes are on the tour, and talk to homeowners who have this and see how it's working out for them. And if you're going to go solar, these are the basic steps. Think about your roof. If you have shading issues, maybe not a good roof. If your roof needs to be replaced in 5 years, you may want to wait. Get your house efficient, right? So think about all those air leaks, think about your appliances, do a little future proofing, right? Think about, well, if I am going to get that heat pump water heater, I need to make an allotment for that when I'm deciding how many panels to put up. And then get at least 3 quotes. illinoissolar.org has a great list of local installers that would come out, and everyone's going to give you a little different opinion. You want to decide if you want to purchase, you want to take out loan, you want to do the lease program, then you start saving. And once you have them on your roof, it's a lot of fun because you get an app that comes with the system, and every day you can kind of see how much solar energy you've made and how much you've put out onto the grid, and you can compare day to day and like, oh, this was a great day. Look at that nice smooth curve. There were no clouds that interrupted things. So you can kind of nerd out on stuff like that if you're so inclined. But I mentioned, not everybody can put solar on their roof. If you live in multi-unit housing, if you're going to move in the next couple years, so community solar is a great option. And as I mentioned, you're subscribing to a field of solar panels somewhere typically in rural Illinois. This one's in Rockford, and I think it was on the site of like some kind of a dump or a quarry or something like that. Something that people aren't going to build houses on, or really a good place for a park. But the houses that surround this were able to buy into this community solar project and get electricity for very cheap. And all the community solar companies in Illinois go through vigorous state vetting, and there's all sorts of forms. They're guaranteed to save money versus buying electricity from ComEd. You're supporting new clean energy on the grid, green collar jobs in Illinois. There are several towns in the suburbs here that actually have city-sponsored community solar programs. Citizens Utility Board is the best resource, again, for community solar. I would check them out if this is something that would appeal to you. All right, more electrification of stuff. So electric vehicles. This may be perhaps the biggest way to reduce your personal emissions. The transportation sector in the United States is actually the largest source of greenhouse gases. And it's way more fun to drive and own than gas mobiles. And I think any Tesla owner could tell you that, it's a totally different driving experience, and they're never going to go back to driving a gas car. I mentioned it costs me about 2 cents a mile to drive. Compare that to when we had $6 a gallon gas not too long ago. Their acceleration is faster. The weight of the car is really low, so they corner really well. They're quiet, they're smooth. And they don't require very much maintenance at all. There's no oil changes that you have to do. All I do is rotate my tires, basically. I don't know about the Tesla owners out there, but it's really not much that has to be done. The Inflation Reduction Act has that $7,500 tax credit. Now, there are some strings attached to that. There are income limits. There are price limits on the vehicle. It has to be made in North America. There are provisions that require elements of the battery to be sourced and manufactured in friendly countries. So there are lists of qualifying vehicles that you can find online. And I did a talk about this in February, which may be on the library's internet still, although a lot has changed just since February, right? So there's been $200 billion in onshoring of battery and EV production since the IRA was passed. It seems like every week I'm hearing of a new company that's deciding to put a battery plant or a solar plant or a EV manufacturing plant in America because of this. there's been, in just the last, I'd say, month, an industry-wide transition to Tesla plugs. Historically, there's been 3 different kinds of plugs that you can plug into an EV. And now everything is kind of moving in the direction of Tesla, which I think overall is good. It's kind of like the VHS versus beta battle that went down in the 80s. Tesla had a better design and they've got more chargers out there, and I think it's going to be good for everybody. There's more models that are coming out all the time. If you want to see some of these new electric cars out there, National Drive Electric Week is in September. So there's going to be EV shows all across the country. I know of one for sure that's going to be in Wilmette. And if you go to National Drive Electric Week, you can find out the details about that. More electrification. So thinking about other places in the house where we use fossil fuels, the kitchen's one of them, right? A lot of people probably have gas stoves, right? So we think, oh, cooking with natural gas, that's methane you're cooking with. There's methane, there's a little bit of benzene in there, there's some other hydrocarbons in there as well. But even when those stoves are off, all of these stoves, new and old, they all leak methane and release carbon monoxide and nitrous oxide when they're on or when they're off. The leaks from gas stoves are equivalent to 500,000 cars every year. That's how much global warming potential is released. And we hear a lot about carbon dioxide as the gas responsible for climate change. Well, methane's actually a lot worse. It lasts a shorter time in the atmosphere, but it actually is some 20 to 80% more potent in terms of trapping heat. What's that? More than that? Okay. Even worse. So the alternative to this, the alternative is what you see here on my countertop. That little cook plate there is an induction cook plate. So it basically heats using magnets, and it's way faster in terms of cooking. It can boil water probably 3 to 5 times faster than cooking it over a flame. That unit I have there, we cook 90% of our food on that single burner. You know, we have a 5-burner gas stove and we almost never use it now. We just use that induction guy, and that was less than $100. Now you can get a whole induction cooktop, eligible for an IRA rebate of up to $850. So it's a better way to cook. It does require that your cookware is ferromagnetic. So if a magnet sticks to it, it'll work. Aluminum doesn't work, glass doesn't work, stainless steel works, copper works. I went to Marshall's and got that pot for like $30. So I have that. I've got a skillet. It's not like we've invested hundreds and hundreds of dollars in induction cookware. It's actually pretty simple to do. And this is a great way to just kind of dip your toe in there. You can get, like I said, one of these countertop guys for less than $100. If you want to boil water for pasta, it'll be boiling before you know it. Other kitchen stuff to think about. This isn't really electrification, but it also really involves reducing your contribution to climate change. Eating local, eating vegetables, you can join a community supported agriculture program. Eating less beef is really important. Cows, they take up a lot of resources in terms of water and energy and just the distribution of meat. Don't waste food. That should go without saying, but a lot of the energy that goes into producing food is literally just thrown in the garbage. Something like 1/3 of all food produced, I've heard, is just wasted. And then compost. So this is our countertop compost bucket. So the great thing about compost is that you're diverting stuff away from the landfill. We're running out of landfill space in Lake County. We're going to be shipping our trash farther and farther away. That's going to cost us more and more. And when you put food into the landfill, it breaks down into methane. If you compost your food scraps, then that actually sequesters that carbon and it can be used to enrich the soil. So you could do this at home in your backyard. A lot of communities around here are doing curbside composting. If your community has it, you should participate. If it doesn't, say, how come we don't have that here? A lot of the other surrounding towns do. So composting. And then in your yard, gas-powered mowers, those release a lot of really bad stuff. In addition, in the leaf blowers, all these little two-stroke engines are super, super dirty and annoying to listen to. There's some really great electric mowers and electric yard care stuff out there where you can get a rake, but that's a lot cleaner. And then think about, how much grass do you really need? I think it's way more interesting to have native plant pollinator gardens. They require less watering, less resources. They capture carbon. They provide habitat for bugs and birds and critters, and are a lot more interesting to look at than grass. All right. So back into the more nerdy stuff, I guess. So heat pumps. Let's dive into heat pumps. So we mentioned earlier on in the presentation, thinking of where in the house we use fossil fuels. It's in the kitchen, our stoves, and generally in the basement, hot water heater, furnace, and clothes dryer. And, we don't really think this is an issue, but in the house, you're releasing carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide. So this is all potentially dangerous stuff. There's benzene that they've found coming out of stoves, health issues for sure. There's an interesting study really correlating childhood asthma to stove use in Illinois particularly. But the heat pump is the way around this. Does anyone here have a heat pump already? Oh, I bet you all actually do. Your refrigerator is actually a heat pump. Your air conditioner is actually a heat pump, but it just goes one way. So a heat pump, in the context that I'm talking about, it goes both ways. And I won't get too into the science of it here, but basically when a gas expands, it cools off. So what you could do is basically have a gas that expands and gets cold, and then it will absorb heat from the surrounding air. Be it outside, even on a 20-degree day, there's heat in that air that cold gas can capture. Or in my basement with my water heater, it can take heat from the ambient air and draw it in, and then it brings that heat, and then it compresses it, and then releases that heat either into the air that circulates in the house or into the hot water tank. Now, that's the heating cycle, and the cooling cycle is just the exact reverse. So our refrigerators, our air conditioners, they all work this way, but they just work in one way. A heat pump, as I'm talking about it, works in two ways, so forwards and backwards. So, and the cool thing is that they're just moving heat. They're not creating heat, right? So if you think about your hot water heater, you're generally burning methane to create heat to heat up water, or your furnace, you're burning methane to heat air to circulate through the house. Well, a heat pump, it's just moving air. It's not creating air. So it could actually be 300 to 400% efficient versus a really efficient gas furnace, which is like 95% efficient. So the easy way to do this in the house is, if your air conditioner is nearing the end of its life, replace it with a heat pump. In Illinois, it gets cold in the winter, and heat pumps, they get less efficient when it gets cold. There are models out there that can go below zero. But the easy way to go is just, if your air conditioner is near the end of its life, replace it with a heat pump. That's what we did. The heat pump, I have it set to heat the house all the way down to like 15 or 20 degrees. If it gets colder than that, our gas furnace kicks on. It's probably, climate-wise, a little more efficient actually to use the gas furnace than it is to use a ton of electricity to run the heat pump when it's that cold. But it's cools the house more efficiently than our previous air conditioner. It was actually cheaper than just a one-way air conditioner when I was pricing it out with our HVAC contractor. So AC replacement, that's the easy win. Uses existing ductwork. Why not? like I mentioned, does hot water as well. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Clothes dryers. We have a gas clothes dryer, as I suspect many of you do. There's actually heat pumps that can dry clothes, and they don't require venting to the outside. So that vent you have from your dryer to the outside is a hole in the wall that heat can go out or cold air can go out. So with a heat pump dryer, you can tighten up your building envelope. Or even better, they have this thing called a solar clothes dryer. It's been around for hundreds of years. It's a clothesline. So hang out your clothes on a sunny day. That's the cheapest and greenest way to go. Not allowed in Lincolnshire. So heat pumps, some of them, they may have higher upfront costs, but there's the incentives that we've talked about. And in the long term, they're going to save you money because they're a lot more energy efficient. All right. So plan ahead. Don't do this stuff in an emergency. Learn from me. So my story, I've wanted to get a heat pump for a while. I'd started doing some research. I'm like, oh, my air conditioner is good for a few more years. I'll research things and then I'll get a heat pump and it'll be great. But I was out tinkering it with it May last year and it stopped working. I just tried cleaning it out and I'm like, oh, I broke it. And then the guy came out and he's like, oh, it requires a new like circuit board. It'll be like $1,000+ to fix, but it's also 10 years old. I'm like, well, I guess we're going to replace this now instead of, in a couple of years. So ideally I would have done a little bit of research first, maybe had a few quotes. But fortunately I talked to my energy auditor. He said, this is a good company. They do a lot of heat pumps. And so they hooked me up with the one that you see right there. I mentioned, well, building heating, that's probably our number one source of energy use in the home, is heating in the winter, especially in this climate. So if you purchase another air conditioner now, just a one-way air conditioner that's not a heat pump, you're basically locking in your emissions for the next 15 years. So now is really a good time to do this. But a lot of contractors here, they don't really promote them. A lot do. It's getting more and more popular though. In Maine, heat pumps are very popular and it's very cold in Maine and they work there. They work there just fine. And like I mentioned, there's some great IRA incentives that are available now. So, but plan ahead. See how old your air conditioner is. And if it's nearing, 10, 12, 15 years, I would say get that heat pump. Water heaters. So a real simple thing you could do is just insulate the hot water pipes that come out of there, right? So if you go down in your basement, you feel the pipes, some of them are going to be hot. That's basically just a continuous loss of heat from the hot water heater. So you could spend $10 at the home improvement store and get pipe insulation. So that'll really reduce the amount of constant heat loss that you're having. My personal story with this one, we had our energy auditor come by. He looked in our basement and he said, if your furnace is on at the same time as your hot water heater is on, there's a high likelihood that that furnace is going to be sucking carbon monoxide out of the flue stack from your hot water heater, just because of the way that the ventilation in that basement was set up. I wasn't happy to hear that. So that prompted me to get a heat pump water heater pretty quickly. If we all made the switch to heat pump water heaters, we would save millions of tons of carbon every year. There's a kind of a cool thing hardware wise in my heat pump that enables Wi-Fi connection to the utility. ComEd doesn't do this yet, but in Hawaii, they're just starting to do this. And it's part of demand response. So if there's times where there's a spike in energy demand, the utility can send out a signal to all the hot water heaters and say, shut off, stop heating water. And then that demand will come down. Or if there's a surplus of energy, they can say, crank up the heat on those hot water heaters, soak up the surplus, and it'll keep that heat, basically storing energy as heat in hot water tanks throughout the area. That just really smooths out the ups and downs. Is there a question, Ashley? Can heat pumps be installed in older homes? Yes, yes, they can. So there's a couple different styles of heat pumps that we'll talk about. There's ducted and then there's ductless. So if you live in an older house that has central air, central heating, the heat pump will utilize those same ducts. If you just have window units and radiators, you can get what's called a mini split ductless system. And those are really simple to install, and those are perhaps even more efficient than the ducted systems. Can you have a heat pump water heater without a heat pump furnace? Absolutely. They're two separate machines. There are some companies that are working on kind of combining them, which is kind of interesting, but this is a totally separate machine. The main similarity is that they basically draw in heat from surrounding air and put it into either air or water using a heat pump. Now, my heat pump, it plugs into a 220 volt outlet. There are new models out now that plug into standard electrical outlets. And like I mentioned before, there's a 30% tax credit on these up to $1,750. 30% credit plus an additional incentive up to $1,750. So, but again, the key thing here, plan ahead. Because when do most people decide to buy a new hot water heater? When it breaks, right? And or when it leaks water everywhere, and you're just going to buy whatever the plumber you can get a hold of on a Saturday night has in stock, and you're going to lock yourself in to fossil gas for another 10, 15 years. So again, check your machine, see how old it is. If it's 10 years or more, start looking at replacing it with a heat pump water heater. Heats the water the same way. You won't even notice it's there. It makes a little humming noise, but it's cheaper and it's cleaner and it's safer. I'm glad I'm not breathing carbon monoxide at home. All right, and then our final theme: take it beyond your home. Right. So money matters. Money talks. There's an interesting report that came out called "Banking on Climate Chaos" from the Rainforest Action Network. Banks are there to make money, and they're going to put their money where money is to be made. And Chase, Citi, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo are among the top financiers of fossil fuel extraction and development. If that does not appeal to you, then you can decide to bank elsewhere. There are green credit card options. You can find those at greenamerica.org. There are green credit unions and banks that take their the money that their members deposit and turn that around as solar loans or clean energy loans and that sort of thing. So money talks, think about what your money is saying. So do this at home, but if we're going to really make any change, it's going to take more than just me electrifying my house and you electrifying your house. We need to spread this. So talk to your friends and neighbors, volunteer with an environmental organization, talk to your city government, your school board, your employer. Now, schools can save a ton of money by going solar. There's all sorts of specific programs for schools to go solar. There's free energy audits for schools. It's just taxpayer money that we're essentially wasting by not doing this stuff. But school boards have a lot on their plate. They may not realize this, but if you say, hey, I'm a taxpayer, I want to make sure you're being a good steward of my money, why don't we have solar on the roof of the school? Fair questions to ask. And of course, vote. So happy to answer any questions. I welcome anyone who's really interested in this kind of stuff to help me out and spread the word. We can volunteer with any of the groups that I work with. And then I'll just leave here some of the helpful websites that I mentioned throughout the talk. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. Great question. I have a few that I know of. I'm not going to mention those just because I don't want to be endorsing any specific companies in this talk. I guess you could Google around. I think that may be one of the best options, and then just ask for um, recommendations from references. That's what I'm saying. So, if you find a company online, say, well, do you have some references I might be able to ask? And I think that's a very helpful way of going.
Heat pumps, they're very common in our street. You get natural gas.
Yes.
We lived in one of those at one point in Canada. At that time, it was about 28 degrees that they could get down to.
Yeah.
And you used resistance heat.
Yeah.
In the ducts.
Yeah.
And there was a blue light that went on. The resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. The resistance heat is kind of expensive. If I don't know if anyone at home was able to hear that, but heat pumps, the comment was heat pumps are very common in places that don't have natural gas heat. So in rural areas, propane heat is how a lot of people heat their homes, and it's very expensive. So heat pumps work. Heat pumps for a while only went down to about 28 degrees. And then if it's colder than that, electric resistance coils within the ducts would kind of take over. Heat pumps now have improved to where there's models that go down to minus 10 degrees without too much of a loss in efficiency. So I mentioned Maine, and in Scandinavia, of course, they're very popular. A lot of it comes down to also making sure your house has a good envelope, a good tight envelope. So that's just going to make the whole process a lot more efficient. But you can still, if you really want to get off of gas altogether, you can have electric resistance heat installed as a backup for the heat pump. The hot water heater heat pump that I have, it does also have electric resistance coils in there. If for some reason I was using a ton of water, the heat pump is a slower way to heat water than electric resistance or with the open flame. So it does have heat coils in there. The ones that plug into a standard outlet tend not to have heater coils. That's why the coils require a lot more electricity. That's why it needs that high voltage outlet. The way that the ones that plug into a standard outlet work is they actually heat the water to a hotter temperature, and then they have a mixing valve. So they'll heat it to 140 degrees, and then a mixing valve will make sure it comes out at 120, 115 degrees so no one gets burned. But it enables a smaller volume of really hot water to go a lot farther and reduces the need to have that electric backup. Yes.
You're touting using people can't put in their own solar to join community solar. I keep getting things from Clear Choice Solar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Comments hourly pricing. We watch that very closely, and sometimes we're paying 1.5
Yeah.
per kilowatt hour. Well, it's pretty hard to make that choice to go to community solar at 12 cents.
Right. Well, Clear Choice, and I've gotten mail from them. They're not actually a community solar company. They're a green energy provider. They are more expensive than ComEd, and their business model basically is they purchase renewable energy credits, which basically helps finance the development of clean energy. Typically, they're going to source those renewable energy credits from Texas or Iowa wind. So it's not actually creating any new renewable energy or solar energy in Illinois. And it's more expensive. So that I'd be very wary of that. Citizens Utility Board does not endorse them. So you want to look for a specific Illinois community solar, but you bring up an interesting point about hourly pricing in community solar. If you do community solar, you can no longer do hourly pricing. So it's a tough choice. You have to kind of see how much money you're saving on hourly pricing versus how much you would save with community solar. You have to run the numbers on that. Yeah, I would go to Citizens Utility Board, and they have a whole tab about community solar in the community, it's called, and they'll have links to probably 5, 6, 7 companies that are active in Illinois with subscription programs. So I didn't mention even better than driving an electric car is a bicycle. So have to acknowledge that you're here with a bicycle helmet. So yeah, that's even better. All right. Other questions? Yeah, good question. So I guess a lot of it depends on your employer and what kind of field your employer is in. Small businesses can take advantage of community solar. Nonprofits can take advantage of community solar. If your company owns the building that they're in, rooftop solar may be an option. ComEd has some fairly detailed energy audits that they offer for, I believe, for free or very little cost, that can kind of go through and suggest potential energy saving and money saving options. So, and then just think about places where energy is used. So, the lighting, building heating and cooling, if there's any, industrial processes that are there. Getting electricity from renewable sources is going generally to be a cheaper way to do it. So money will talk. So it makes good business sense. Yes.
Doesn't cycle. There's such a huge loss in cycle.
Yeah. The question is if there's any variable speed air conditioners or heat pumps rather than cycling on and off. Yeah. So I would recommend any heat pump HVAC equipment have a variable speed inverter. So ideally, you want them to just be running constantly at very, very low speed. That's the most efficient way to go. So the HVAC contractor should be able to help you out with that, but those are available. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, from my personal experience, when my air conditioner broke, I had the contractor come out and I said, I want a heat pump. He's like, okay, for your house this size, this is the one that we recommend. Said, just curious, if I just wanted an air conditioner, how much would it be? The air conditioner was a little bit more. And I did this before the Inflation Reduction Act came out, mere months before. So could have saved a couple $1,000s if my air conditioner lasted one more year. But ComEd has discounts for heat pumps that the contractor is able to kind of pass along. So, in my limited experience, the heat pump was actually a little bit cheaper. A question from the Zoom. Uh-huh. Sure. So the question is, if you do this stuff yourself, can you still get the tax credit? So say you're in the building trades and you're going to install your own water heater. Can you still get the tax credit? The answer is yes. So you just fill out a tax form, send it in with your proof of purchase, and that'll work. The one exception to that is with solar. to get the Illinois solar renewable energy credits, which is going to cover 20 to 30% of the installed cost. You have to be an accredited installer. So that's the one, one situation where I guess you couldn't do it yourself. Yes. Yeah, question about the Tesla roof tiles. I've been getting questions about the Tesla roof tiles for many, many years, and I still have, I don't think it's taking off very, very rapidly. I think there's been issues with manufacturing, and they have not really been installing very many. I know there is a company based in Texas. It's a roofing company that has some solar roof tiles that actually seem like they work, and they have a manufacturing process for them. Have you heard anything about the Tesla roof tiles lately?
They are so.
Okay.
But the price. It's something like it's way out.
Yeah. So okay. The comment was the price of the Tesla roof tiles is very high. I think the way you have to picture it is that it's a replacement for your roof and a solar system. So if you add those two together, maybe it makes sense. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, wind is big. Illinois has a fair bit of wind and growing wind. There was the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act that passed in Illinois a couple of years back, and that's intended to create an energy transition for Illinois onto carbon-free sources, I think by 2035, and 100% renewable by 2050 or something like that. And there's a lot of money for wind in that. It's interesting. There's been some people who've been looking at offshore wind out in Lake Michigan as a possibility as well. That's certainly more expensive than onshore wind, but yeah, wind is more at the level of utility scale rather than community solar or homeowner solar. So there's wind that's in our energy mix right now. We just don't really know about it or see it up here.
There was an attempt for a while. A small
Yeah.
I don't know if that took off or if I've ever seen it.
Yeah. Question was about small wind turbines for homeowners and that sort of thing. I think the issue is they require maintenance. And they have to be of a large enough size to really generate a substantial amount of electricity. And I think solar is kind of the way that people are going to tend to go. In a residential area, the wind is going to be intermittent. There's a reason why they put those turbines really, really high up in the air, because the wind is a lot more constant there. Uh-huh.
But it's like
Mm.
times carbon dioxide, and what it dissipates, dissolves into carbon dioxide. It's one of the components.
Mhm.
Much worse than carbon dioxide itself.
Yeah. So the comment was about methane being worse than carbon dioxide. I've heard up to 20 times as much global warming potential as carbon dioxide. And then when it breaks down sooner. It only lasts about, short. I think it's on the order of 10 years or something, but it breaks down into carbon dioxide. And the thing with methane is there's constant plumes of methane that are just being released from the fracking fields. and there's wellheads that are just releasing methane. It's actually a fairly low hanging fruit of carbon reduction, would just be controlling methane leakage from wellheads. And that would go a long way. Mhm. Mhm.
They realize their future is in renewable.
Yeah. Yeah. The comment was a gentleman here knows people who work in the energy industry, and they within the energy industry, they realize renewables are the future, and they're all working on this kind of from different angles. And yes, similarly in the automotive world, right? I think all the car manufacturers out there realize that the internal combustion engines days are probably limited, and it's kind of a race to see who can keep up with the technology with electric vehicles. I mean, Tesla has dominated the field in the United States, and the owner is the richest person in the world, or amongst them, or he's up there. And yeah, so yeah, there's money to be made in this stuff. That's the other thing, right? You don't have to do this for the green reasons. Companies don't have to do this because it's the good, responsible thing to do. This is the way that people save money and people will be making money. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, great question. So the question was, what about people who live in the city, who don't have a driveway? How are they going to charge their electric cars? In the suburbs here, we got it relatively easy. It's a definite challenge. So there's some innovative companies out there that are incorporating EV charging into light posts. So I've seen that. Um, I think what you're going to probably start to see is, rather than gas stations, you're going to see level 3 charging stations where you can pull up, plug your car into a level 3 charger. Those are the really high voltage, fast chargers. You'll leave your car there for 30 minutes and it will fill up. And during the 30 minutes, they'll have probably something to kind of, entertain you and take your money in various ways. So snack shop or something like that. Um, so yeah, yeah, we have parking meters, and those are all wired. And workplace charging is another kind of option for people who may commute via car. If you could plug in at your workplace, level 2 charger, or even level 1 charger, for a few hours a day, that's going to take care of all your charging needs. And typically, if there's a garage at your workplace or a parking lot, they can put the infrastructure in pretty simply for that.
That's the charging station here at the library.
Mhm. Yeah, there are charging stations here at the library for sure. Um, I mean, I think the level 2 charging stations that we have at the library here, they'll put about 20 miles on the battery in an hour. It's a nice thing. It's a convenient thing. I know, like, if I go to Trader Joe's and that spot's open, I'll plug in and I'll put like 5 miles on the battery in the time that I'm there. Does that really move the needle in terms of EV adoption for people? No, but it's a visible sign that, hey, EVs are here. There's charging stations around. There's a lot more charging stations out there than you might think. And if you have an EV, you got it. There's all these apps. I mean, Tesla obviously has their whole network. If you have a non-Tesla car, I use an app called PlugShare, and it just shows you where all these charging stations are. And they're growing like mushrooms everywhere right now. And it's interesting because as everything is transitioning over to Tesla plugs, a lot of these stations are going to have to get kind of retrofitted or adapters and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of funding through the Infrastructure Act to get a lot of charging stations out there, and also through the Volkswagen Dieselgate. The state of Illinois has a lot of money that they're putting towards getting charging stations out there in the public.
Park in front of your house. You can't guarantee you get that parking place.
Right.
So you can run the electricity out there, but you can ensure you get it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a challenge in the city. It is a challenge for sure. For sure. There was a new law that was passed in Illinois. I think it's called the EV Charging Act, that requires all new construction that has parking for those parking spots to be pre-wired for electric vehicle charging. So so if there is new construction going on in the city and they have a parking pad out, all those spaces have to at least have the conduit run so an EV charger can be installed. So that's kind of exciting. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not a lot about there's plenty of education and things that so there's stuff to do in there. I know there's a lot of charging stations outside of like Target and
Yeah.
because the idea is we talk about, say you're in there for an hour, you get a full charge on a supercharger outside of my. So we want to give you something to do while you're.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, so the comment was Thornton's in Riverwoods that's being built is going to have a whole EV charging section. And from a business perspective, you basically have a captive audience there. And if you make something appealing for them to come into the store and spend some time and money, you got someone who's going to spend half an hour there.
On trips, they could charge less than 20 minutes.
Mhm.
You can't even go get a hamburger.
Yeah. The comment was, at some charging stations, you can charge in 20 minutes. And, these times are going to get shorter and shorter. The Korean companies, Hyundai and Kia, they have the capacity to charge insanely fast and, go from 10 to 80% in 15 minutes or so. And, other companies are going to catch up with that. There's a lot of new technology. There's solid state batteries that are going to be coming out that are going to be faster to charge and hold more energy. So it's really exciting stuff that'll be coming out over the next, I'd say 5 to 10 years, but it's probably going to be even shorter time frame than that with the batteries and the charging rates. Yeah, one more from Zoomland. Great question. Has EV ownership become a partisan issue? Well, I guess that's open to interpretation for everybody, but I think Elon Musk has maybe broken down some partisan divides. I'd say he's kind of made a little bit of a turn towards the right, and I think really we're all living on the same planet. It shouldn't be none of this stuff really should be partisan. I mean, Texas right now is roasting, and their grid fortunately is being propped up right now in large part due to their enormous wind and solar resources. So Texas is the #2 renewable energy state. They have more wind than any other state, and they're probably going to overtake California pretty soon in terms of solar development. So on some levels, this may seem like a partisan thing, but really, like I said, we're all on the same planet and money talks. And, green stuff is often the cheaper way to go now. So hopefully it's not going to continue to be a partisan issue if it still is. What is the #1 selling car in California? Tesla Model 3 is the #1. #2, I would say, is the Tesla Y. Okay, so there you go. All right.
What car has the highest content in US manufacturing?
What car has the highest content of US manufacturing? That's going to be Tesla as well. Yeah, all 4 models of Tesla are well above anything else in terms of American content. So, right, great. Yeah, we have a Tesla fan in the audience. All right, super. Well, I think that's everything. I thank you all so much for your attention and your interest and coming out tonight in person. It's so great to actually interact with people again when I do this, and it's good to have those of you at home on Zoom listening in and asking questions. So if other stuff comes up, please feel free to send me an email. Happy to discuss more in the future. And with that, all right, thank you.